Okay, now for the really scary stuff. We've talked viruses, we've talked bacteriophages. Now we're going to talk about another ultra microscopic infectious agent that's even smaller than the viruses. Remember from one of the first lectures in this chapter, we got the big eukaryotic cell, the much smaller prokaryote, and then the viruses. How can you get smaller than a virus? Well, you go to an individual protein. Individual proteins that can infect and do damage. We refer to these as prions. Prions, or proteinaceous infectious agents, are nothing more than a single protein that gets inside your body, travels to your brain, infects one of your neurons, and starts turning certain neural proteins into copies of the prion. So think about it. There is a protein, PRC, in your body. It's shaped like this. A prion is shaped like that. The prion comes along, binds to the PRC, changes its shape. You now have two prions. Those two prions go to more PRC and just goes going and going and going. And before you know it, that cell has accumulated enough of the prion proteins, it starts to die off. It dies off, splits open, releasing the prions, which spread to more neighboring neurons. And it keeps going and going and going. You look at the two figures above my head. The blue one, this is what a normal, quote-unquote normal brain tissue should look like. The red one, see all those gaps, all those that looks like bubbles? That's areas of dead neurons. We see the prions in human diseases known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Creutzfeldt-Jakob, and there's also in the Pacific Islanders something known as Kuru. Both of them are diseases that resemble advanced stages of dementia. They will lead to patient death. There is no treatment. There is no coming back from this. The way it spread, the Kuru, Pacific Islanders, part of their history is that after a a battle, they would eat the brains of their adversaries, trying to steal some of their power. Well, it turns out eating of the brain means they got prions in them. The prions were absorbed, transported bloodstream to the brain. That person now had Kuru. We're not quite sure how here in the West, the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is spread. We're still trying to figure that out. We know by looking at animal models, specifically bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE. It's a cow version of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's a prion disease that spread cow to cow. The way it spread, well, turns out cows have a slight cannibalistic tendency. At the slaughterhouses, they take all the meat, take some of the bones. Turns out waste product is central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. Turns out the brain and the spinal cord are high in fat, all the myelin sheathing and whatnot. Well, they take the brain, the spinal column, and then they sell it to feed manufacturers who grind it up, add it to cow feed as a cheap fat and protein source. Come to find out, cows prefer the taste of feed that has ground up brain and spinal cord in it. Well, one cow with the prions gets slaughtered. Its brain, spine gets ground up, put into feed, which is then fed to 10, 100, 200 cows. Not all of them, but many of them also now get BSC, and so on and so forth. That's why for a good portion of the 90s, Britain was not allowed to export out any beef products because they noticed that this was happening. We haven't noticed it so much here in the States, but then again, we also don't have the regulatory controls that Britain does, and we don't test every cow like they do now.